Welcome to this episode of Diaspora Scholars TV, and today we are in Louisiana. We are privileged to have Professor Fulbert Namwamba. I tell you, he's a household name. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
My pleasure too as well. So I'm Dr. Ndombera, and we run this show mostly to scholars resident in the US, but mostly also we want to be able to try and uplift the young people who are in Africa. And so we thought you'll be a great guest today, more so because you are also today's preacher at this church, Christ the King
Christian Center.
You've been living here for quite a while.
34 years to be
34
specific.
years.
Yes.
Wow. 34 years is a lifetime, really.
34 years in the United States. I lived 17 years in Louisiana, and I've been living for 8 years in the state of Maryland.
Oh, 8 years.
So today I'm a visiting preacher, but I was a founding member of this church.
You are a founding member of this church.
Yes.
Wonderful. So it's 26 years since you guys started this church. Give us just a brief history of this church before we go back into part of your, a little bit about your academic life later on, your professional life later on, because the mentors that I will seek are people like you. I go all over the US, in North America, Canada, Mexico, being able to seek, mentorship opportunities from people like you. So today, this weekend, I'm here. So briefly about the church, and then we'll go back to a little bit about your career.
So if you notice this church, you'll realize that the man who was playing a guitar is a PhD, Kenyan.
Yeah.
The guy who was playing the keyboard is a PhD.
Wow.
The guy behind the sound room, Dr. Kwemba, is a PhD. The pastor is a PhD.
Yeah.
There's an overrepresentation of people who've had exposure to academia.
Wow.
But that's not where we started.
No.
When we started, none of us had a PhD.
Wow.
A good number were still students. A pastor had just started his work as an accountant. My wife had started as an assistant professor at Southern University, and I was finishing my doctorate at Iowa State University.
Oh,
and that's the time we moved here. Before that, I was an ardent church hopper and a member of Kenya Christian Fellowship in Baton Rouge.
Okay.
The problem is Kenya Christian Fellowship wasn't integrating well into African Christian Fellowship. So I'm one of the first people as a family who joined African Christian Fellowship. And the vision got to Pastor Azoru to start Christ the King Christian Center. So for the 2 years when it started, I just used to visit as I was church hopping, 3-4 different churches. Finally, when I joined, then I was made the chairman of the building committee, and under my leadership, that's how we came up with this sanctuary. And then we worshipped here for 16 years before we moved to Maryland.
Wow. Oh my goodness. What is very inspirational to me, and what encouraged me to seek this interview, was the very fact that you've been able to balance almost all areas of your life: academics, professions, religious matters, family, and it's a great inspiration that you are able even to find time to do all this. So briefly again, your academic journey, just give us a little bit about it. I know you said you were at Iowa State. Tell us, what did you study there?
So first, let me begin back in the motherland.
Yes.
My parents were school teachers, and they taught in very many high schools.
Okay.
They taught in very many high schools, including Mangu High School, Kapsabet Boys High School. They taught at St. Patrick's E10. And from my background, from my background, I then
geology.
In geology, I was the first Kenyan scientist in petroleum exploration.
You studied petroleum exploration at the University
in Kenya,
in the University of Nairobi?
In the University of Nairobi, I studied geology.
Okay.
So I worked for a company called Compagnie Générale de Géophysique.
A French company.
CGG, yes. We were subcontracting for Amoco Kenya Petroleum Company. We were at Shell BP House. My office is right now the office of the Deputy President of Kenya. That was my office.
That was your office?
We worked on TVK1, TVK2, TVK3, what is now Turkana. Those were lines of geophysics that I worked as a geophysicist.
At that time?
At that time.
Work had started at that time in Turkana?
Yes, in the 80s. Then...
very few people know that.
Yes, very few people know the history. So, when Amoco Petroleum Company could not agree with the National Oil Corporation of Kenya, they stopped the operations, but the data had to be passed to National Oil Corporation. Later on, this data is what was used to come up with the oil fields that are now tallow. However, when I left CGG, I worked with the National Museums of Kenya under Richard Leakey.
Wow.
He got me in touch with a gentleman from University of Utah called Frank Brown. So I came to Utah and I did a master's degree in geology.
Oh, which year was that?
That is 1989 to 1993. Then I went to State University.
What did you study at the University of Utah? Wow.
Geology.
Still, it's geology. That was, thank you. Because,
geology. And as I was finishing my master's degree, I got an offer at SUNY at Buffalo.
Okay.
State University of New York at Buffalo. I went to Buffalo and I did a master's degree in Geographic Information Systems and Computer Cartography. Then I met the love of my life, the later to be Professor Grace Namwamba. I moved to Iowa State University where I did a doctorate degree in water resources engineering from Iowa State.
Iowa State.
I got a job with Iowa Department of Natural Resources for a year. Then I came back and I worked for Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ.
Wow.
There was an opening at Southern University here in Baton Rouge, and I took the job to teach GIS and water resources, and was at Southern University for 16 years. 16
good years.
Yes.
And it is at that time that I, started, getting associated with this church, building it, developing, and growing the congregation.
That is correct.
Wow.
And
when you were at Buffalo, was Professor Makau Mutua at that school at the time?
No, Professor Makau Mutua came after me. The Kenyan who was there was a man called Dr. Chilungu, and his brother, a gentleman called Erastus Namudala. Those were like our role models at that time. Makau Mutua hadn't joined Buffalo at that time. So when I left, Makau Mutua came later.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, that's a very, impressive resume. And, the young folks watching are just, wondering like, oh, wow. So I know you worked for several companies. Were you able to, like, after getting your PhD, do some work in Kenya as well, in any committee or any national organization? Or
so before coming to the US, I said I worked for CGG, Amoco Petroleum, and National Museums of Kenya. I was still underemployed of National Museums of Kenya until when I finished my PhD.
Wow.
But in the middle of my graduate school, National Museums of Kenya fired me 3 times. First time I went back, I got my job back. Second time, the third time, when they told me I'm no longer in the employ of National Museums of Kenya, it was time. You can only try so much. Remember, when I came to the US, I had no intentions of remaining in the US. I wanted to go back to Kenya.
You had a job anyway, yeah.
My wife worked for Egerton University. And she was going back to her job. When she finished and she was waiting for me, and she requested them that I would finish a year later, instead they discontinued her employment.
Oh no.
So we never chose to stay in the US, except we had no jobs to go back to in Kenya.
Yeah.
Kenya's misfortune was US luck.
Kenya's misfortune was US luck.
Yes.
Oh wow. At that point, I want to ask you, what would be your advice right now? I know there are many scholars in the US and many will be watching this. What advice would you give them? I know there are opportunities here, but at the same time, we should be able to develop back home.
Yes.
What would be your general advice in terms of being able to navigate the future job market here, home, elsewhere? How should that go? How would you advise a young man graduating from college? What should they consider?
First of all, this thing has got different facets.
Yes.
This graduating from Kenya, undergrad, and pursuing graduate school, I'll take it like this. The percentage of graduation of Kenyans graduating as undergraduates in the US is somewhere between 5% and 0%. But the graduation rate in graduate school, masters and PhD, is anywhere between 80 to 90%.
Wow.
So, Kenyan chartered universities are recognized in the US. So, they should continue to strive to try and come to do their graduate school in the US, because when you compare schools, elementary schools, secondary schools, undergrad and graduate schools, the United States has the best graduate school in the world. In fact, the graduate schools here are full of Indian and Chinese students. Kenyan universities are still rated highly despite all the complaints. Kenyan universities are well rated. So if somebody has a good degree, a strong degree, upper second and above, I would strongly advise for them to try and find a school here and a program that fits them for graduate studies. When they come for graduate studies here, what direction they go to is determined by the circumstances. Right now, we have 60 universities in Kenya or more?
Yeah.
And they don't have enough doctorate degrees, people teaching at PhD levels.
Yeah.
So they do have a lot of openings in Kenya today.
Yeah.
Kenya had a brain drain of PhDs in, I'd say, anywhere between 10 to 25 to 10 years ago. Kenya did not hold on to their PhDs, so they lost them to other countries.
Including the US.
Yeah, so I'll give them the advice my father gave me when I was living for the United States. After everybody had spoken and said, Fulbert, when you go abroad, come back to Kenya, my father said he had the last word. And he told me, that's not the thing. When you finish your doctoral studies, find the best employer who will hire you for your credentials and brains.
Wow.
That is what has guided me. In other words, if my country had wanted me, if the National Museums of Kenya had wanted to keep me, if Egerton University had wanted to keep my wife, we would be in Kenya right now. Kenya lost a chance to lose their professionals during that period of time. And now Kenya has a shortage of professionals.
Yeah.
So right now, it's really driven by what are your credentials, who wants you. If you graduate in the US and the opportunities are in Canada, go. If you graduate in the US and the opportunities are in the United Arab Emirates or in Saudi Arabia, go. If the best opportunities are in Kenya, go. Then, if you are being given several offers, you balance the offers, check out. How do the salaries look like? How do opportunities of growth look like? And make the decision based on those circumstances. I would be very hypocritical to start saying you must go back to the motherland, or to tell them you must remain in the United States. That's not how it works. Let the market and let your expectations and let the opportunities drive your decision.
Wow.
That's a very honest presentation that I do to my compatriots.
Wow, well spoken indeed. In this, first part, I think we've explored, your initial journey, and we want to thank you. But we are coming to part 2 just after a break. One thing that I want you to speak to later on is, again, a question I asked earlier, how to balance all this. But that will come up after part 2. This is Diaspora Scholars TV. I will be right back. My name is Daktari, and we are interviewing Professor Fulbert Namwamba right here in Baton Rouge.